hippest shop of swinging London clothed the burgeoning psychedelic movement and became a legendary Kings Road hotspot. In 1967, it inspired one of the popular bands of the underground to write a song, though that song was not what you might have expected from a single taking its name from a hipster fashion boutique at the height of the summer of love. This is the Overlooked Hotel, and this is the story of the Purple Gang and Granny Takes a Trip. Granny Takes a Trip was London's first psychedelic boutique, opening before psychedelia even became a recognised thing. It was opened in 1966 on the King's Road by Nigel Weymouth and Sheila Cohen, ostensibly as an outlet for Cohen's extensive vintage clothes collection, and before long the shop was at the centre of swinging London as the mod scene gave way to the multicoloured spectacle of the hippie era, and the constantly changing facade of the shop kept it on the cutting edge of what was cool. Somehow this symbol of the hippie era kept going long after many of its contemporaries had faded away, well into the 1970s. The original shop was closed and sold in 1974, but the name lingered on until 1979, by which time it must have seemed like a curious anachronism. In 1967, Stockport band The Purple Gang, named after a 1920s Prohibition-era bootlegger mob, and not to be confused with the American garage band of the same name and same time period, decided to cash in on the shop's fame by releasing a single bearing the same name, Granny Takes a Trip. The song was recorded at the same time that Pink Floyd was recording Arnold Layne, and both bands used Joe Boyd as producer. But while the Floyd single mixed their psychedelic sound with a commercial pop tune, the Purple Gang was a different kettle, or jug, of fish altogether. If we were playing some sort of musical Cluedo, we might well put all of the clues together and reach a conclusion about what this record would sound like. Indeed, this is what I did when I first heard of the existence of it, and why I was extremely keen to track a copy down. This was long before you could listen to obscure records on YouTube. While the Purple Gang is a somewhat ambiguous name, we have to factor in the Joe Boyd and loose Pink Floyd connection, the year it was recorded, the Purple Gang's appearances at the UFO Club and the 14-hour Technicolor Dream at Alexander Palace, the title of the song, and the fact that the band's lead singer was called Lucifer, real name Pete Walker, no relation to the filmmaker of the same name, obviously. Certainly the BBC did all of that when they decided to ban the records from the airwaves, commenting that it was a song with a dubious title designed to corrupt the nation's youth, and a band that boasts a warlock for a singer will not be tolerated by any decent society. So there. Like the Beeb, as a teenager I assumed, after reading about the record in Barry Miles's Pink Floyd book, that it would be a wild slice of psychedelic occult heaviness, somewhat, and admittedly this was a grasp, in the Arthur Brown Fire mould. And when I found a copy in a second-hand record shop in Stockport, you can bet that I snapped it up and eagerly transported it home, chortling at the rare bargain that I had just secured. So you can imagine my disappointment when the record turned out to be a jolly jug band romp telling the story of a pensioner with a yen to become a famous movie star. The trip she takes is a physical one, to Hollywood.
So once a year Granny takes a trip, always first class, and she's well equipped for the movie auditions in Hollywood town. She always turns up, but she's always turned down.
It feels more like something that Max Bygraves might have performed, and comes complete with a kazoo solo. Both Syd Barrett and John Peel might have praised the track at the time of release, but this was not the record that I expected, or indeed that I wanted. I played it once, then put the record away with the rest of my 7 inches, where it stayed undisturbed for some time. But of course time is a great healer, and in this case, once the disappointment wore off, the single kept beckoning to me. There was something about the song that intrigued me, even if that something was, for a long time, just how bloody awful it was. Eventually I decided to give it another go. I can now see the song's connection to the determinedly twee faux psych-pop of the era, where every pop band seemed to be singing about tea parties and matchstick men, and where jug bands were suddenly incomprehensibly popular. If Syd Barrett could write the jug band blues, then perhaps this wasn't so removed from the acid-tinged novelty psych of the era. And as a slice of disposable pop, Granny Takes a Trip is not, in fact, completely awful. It's very much second division British psych pop of the time, but it's an inoffensive and jaunty little number. I still think that it was sold under false pretenses, and remember that with a BBC ban in 1967 it would have gone unheard by most people, including people at the BBC, it seems, given the reaction. But time has been relatively kind to the song, which was so removed from the prevailing sound of the era, or any pop era for that matter, that it hasn't really dated. Now it feels eccentric and oddball, and so perfectly in keeping with the whole musical world that it emerged from, where there was often a fine line between serious underground music and novelty tunes. It feels a bit like a children's record that's somehow become blurred with underground rock in a moment of psychedelic hallucination, and it's very much its own thing. While a lot of the twee pop psych of the era is pretty interchangeable, this sounds unlike anything else. The Purple Gang's debut album, The Purple Gang Strikes, came and went without anybody really noticing in 1968, and that was pretty much it for them, until 1998, when, of course, they reformed and recorded a new album. The band have continued on and off ever since, with varying lineups and members coming, going, and sometimes dying. Presumably the BBC ban on their most famous single has now expired, but you still shouldn't expect to hear it being played on the radio anytime soon. Let us know in the comments what you make of Granny Takes a Trip. Did you ever go to the shop? Did you enjoy the record? Fascinated to find out. As always, I'll remind you to give this video a like if you've enjoyed it, and if you want to see more of this kind of thing, then just subscribe to The Overlooked Hotel to make sure that you never miss any of our future videos, or indeed our previous videos. There's a fascinating collection of stories out there for you to discover. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.